You don't have to be rich, you don't have to be perfect, and you don't even have to really be a foster parent in order to adopt from foster care. Sound too good to be true? Well, there are some other things to take into account. You do need to be open to adopting kids who are truly in need of a family, and many of these kids are slightly older, part of a sibling group, or possibly have some level of special needs. And you do need to be willing to go through a somewhat confusing, a little bit frustrating process. But don't worry, today I'm here to break down the whole thing for you. Hi, I'm Katie. I'm a mom to 3 awesome kids who we adopted from foster care as waiting children. And I think that adopting a waiting child from foster care is the adoption world's best kept secret, and I don't know why. And I want more people like you to know this is an option that you could consider to grow your family. And so I work as an adoption consultant to help families like yours get started and get through this adoption process from foster care in one piece. So how does one adopt a waiting child from foster care? Well, first of all, let's just explain really quick what it means to adopt a waiting child. So a waiting child is a child who has been in foster care for quite a while. Their parental rights have already been terminated, so that means that their biological parents no longer are able to work towards a case plan of being able to reunify with their children, and so now the child is legally free for adoption. Now, in many cases, the foster family will adopt the child who's already in their home, but this is not always the case. And there can be a lot of reasons for this. For my kids, their foster parents were much older, in their 70s and 80s, and they just didn't feel that it would be fair to the kids to have parents that were so old as they grew up. In other cases, there are families who truly just desire to be a temporary safe place for kids, and therefore they're not planning on adopting any of the children that come into their home because they want to keep that space open for kids who are in need of a temporary placement. I've even heard of situations where one of the foster parents was diagnosed with a really bad illness like cancer, and they just knew it wasn't the right plan to continue with the adoption of this young child when their future was kind of hanging in the balance. So lots of reasons, but when that child is legally free for adoption and their foster family is not planning to adopt them, they become a waiting child. And if this stat is still correct, at any given time within the US, there are over 100,000 waiting children in foster care, and many of them are hoping to be adopted by a loving family like yours. So how does one actually get started doing this? Well, the first step I think is often overlooked, and that is to research. Research adoption, trauma, foster care, you name it. And so many people skip this step, and I would argue that it's one of the most important. Because unless you spent time in foster care yourself, or if you're an adoptee, or if your family maybe adopted some of your siblings, or you have a friend who's an adoptee, there's a lot we don't know. So I highly recommend reading, watching, talking to other people who are adoptive families or adoptees so that you can get an idea of what life might look like. And while you're at it, why don't you subscribe to my channel, because I talk about these topics constantly. And if you're in this research stage, I promise you it's going to be worth it. It's free, okay? So go subscribe. It's okay, I'll wait. Okay, thank you. The second step on this journey is to find a foster care adoption agency to work with. This step can be really tricky for some people because, I'll just be honest, the websites for these agencies are not the best, but I'm going to lay down kind of the basics for you. In most states, you're going to have 2 options of the type of agency you're going to work with. You can work with the public state agency, or you can work with a private agency. There are pros and cons to both. I have a lot of videos about that on my channel, so you can look for more. I'm not going to go too in depth here. I tend to lean more towards private agencies because I think they offer the best wraparound services. They're more likely to be able to place you with a child within your state or outside of your state. And we had a super positive experience with our adoption agency. One website I highly recommend looking at is Adopt US Kids. If you look at their state adoption information, you can often find a list of agencies within your state there. It just does take quite a bit of research to look through all of those and find the ones that are maybe still in operation or that seem like the best fit for you. If you want to skip that step, that is a big thing I do as an adoption consultant is I help find an agency for you. I do the research on your behalf so that you can move forward without being bogged down by all that information overload. So you can check out the link in the description if you would like to book a consultation with me. The third step you are going to do is you're going to fill out A lot of paperwork, and it can feel a bit invasive sometimes. Oftentimes you have to get a medical clearance from your doctor saying that you're healthy or fit enough to be a parent. Don't worry, you don't have to be in shape or anything, or I would not have gotten approved. You're going to have to fill out all sorts of financial information. You're going to have to tell them the amount of debt you have, the amount of assets you have. I mean, it can feel, like I said, a little bit intrusive, but you get through it. It's not that bad at the end of the day. You have to scan a lot of documents and all that fun paperwork stuff. And sometimes at the same time, you'll start the fourth step, which is to start taking classes for your home study. When a lot of us think of home study, they think of the next step I'm going to talk about, which is the home visit. But your home study is actually all the training, all the stuff you do leading up to getting your license. So part of completing a home study is doing the pre-adoption trainings. Good news for you is that most of them are online now. When we started our classes for adoption stuff, which was in like 2018 maybe, they were all in person. And let me tell you, it was rough. They were Friday nights from 7 to 10. And not the most fun way to spend your Friday night. So I'm jealous of all of you who get to do them online and you don't have to drive anywhere. So it's not too bad. It does vary state to state, county to county, agency to agency, but typically this is going to take about a month or more. I think for us it took a couple of months because they were in person and we're busy and we were out of town sometimes, so we had to make them up. So it does depend, but just know it doesn't take that long. Once you are done with these, or if you're close to done, in some states they do it weird, they do it backwards, they do your home visit first, I don't know. I think that's a little funny. Most states, I've worked with people from probably well over half of the states in the US now as an adoption consultant, and most states, you'll do your classes first and then your home study visit. So during this next step, they're going to visit your home. The caseworker is going to come. They may come 2 times or maybe even 3. Sometimes they just come once, really depends, but they're going to come, and yes, they are going to look at your house, but they're not coming around with that white glove to check and make sure it's perfectly clean. They're simply coming over to check for safety. They're checking to make sure that you actually have space for this child, and they want to see how much space you have. In our case, and this was at our old house, the house we live in now is pretty big, but our old house wasn't huge by any means, and they told us we could be approved for up to 6 children. And we said, oh, that's funny, but we're not saying yes to 6 children. And they said, oh, it's okay. We just have to say how many kids you technically could fit here. So that was kind of funny. We're like, whoa, not 6 kids. So they're checking for space. They're checking for safety. They will give you a list of their requirements before they come. So in our situation, we had to have like a fire exit plan. We had to have a tornado plan because I'm in Ohio. It depends on where you live. Maybe if you're on the West Coast, it would be like an earthquake plan. I don't know. Your agency will tell you those things though. Sometimes you have to have medication locked up, or you have to have cleaning products up high on a shelf, just kind of kid-proofing your home. And I know a lot of people get really nervous about this stuff. Just know it's not that bad. They're not coming in thinking your house is like not clean enough or there's a little bit of dust. They are looking for safety. You're going to want to make sure you have like working smoke alarms. Sometimes they require you to have a fire extinguisher on each level of your house. Things like that. Again, you'll get this information well in advance so you can be prepared for that time. But during that visit, they're also going to do the interviews. And if you're a very private person, you may struggle with this. I've worked with some clients in the past who were like, I don't really feel comfortable telling them every single thing about my life. And the truth is, it's just part of the process. They need to vet you, make sure you're going to be a good fit. They're going to ask you questions about your marriage if you are married. They're going to ask you about your family of origin, your parents, your support network. They're going to ask about your parenting philosophies. They're going to ask things like, how do you handle conflict, or how do you handle frustration? And they do background checks for adoption, rightfully so. So if you have something in your history that was flagged, they may ask you questions about that. But just know the interview section can be quite long. You can feel a little bit like, wow, this caseworker now knows me better than a lot of my friends and family do, and that's okay. I always tell people it's kind of like when you go to a therapist and you're like, oh, I don't want to tell them these things. It's like, they're literally therapists. They've probably heard way crazier stuff than what you're telling them. And so for these caseworkers, they're so used to asking these questions to people. So really, it's nothing to worry about. and it'll probably go much more smoothly than you're even anticipating. The sixth step is to get your license. So oftentimes after your final home study visit, they're going to compile your profile, they're going to send it in, and I would say that process can tend to take about a month, sometimes a little more, just depending on how busy things are, if the caseworker gets your file sent in at a reasonable time. But once you get your approval back, you are ready to start step 7, which is the matching phase. During the matching phase, you're going to start inquiring about children that you think you could be a good match for. In some rare cases, your agency may do that for you. They may recruit on your behalf. I am finding with working with clients that that's less and less common now. We apparently had a unicorn agency where they were just amazing and they did that for us. I still would send in profiles and say, hey, we'd love to hear about this kid. And they were like, oh, we already submitted you on them and 5 others. That's not normal, I've discovered. So you will start looking at photo listings. On Adopt US Kids, there's a photo listing, but I encourage you to look at others as well. Almost every state has their own photo listings. Sometimes they're called heart galleries. You could look up, if you're from Texas, you could say Heart Gallery of Texas. And I think Texas, to give an example, actually has ones for different regions of the state, if I'm remembering correctly. So just go and start Googling those things, and that's how you're going to be able to look at some profiles and learn more about these kids and submit your home study. Now, this process can be really disheartening at times because I think for a lot of us, that's the step we were the most looking forward to, and then it comes and it's you're not hearing back from people and you're thinking there are all of these kids who need a home, and sometimes you don't hear back at all. But it can be a kind of long an emotionally draining process. I mean, you're going to hear stories about all of these kids and difficult things they've gone through. And it's easy to start imagining bringing that kid into your home and them being your child. And then oftentimes that doesn't happen. And so my heart goes out to you when you're in that stage, because I know how difficult it was. And I think it's hard for a lot of us too, because it feels like hurry up and wait. You're getting all this paperwork done. You're taking all these classes. You're prepping your home. And then you're just sitting there waiting to hear back from people, and it doesn't feel like you're actively working towards adoption. But don't worry, your time will eventually come. And then that happy day will come when you get matched. So before you actually get a match, they might respond to you and say, hey, we saw your profile, we think you could be a good fit. There are a couple other families. We're going to kind of pick which family we think is best. But if you're chosen, then you're going to get to go to what is called an adoption presentation meeting. This is your chance to ask every single question you have about this child you may be adopting. If the agency is doing their job correctly, they will not have told this child yet that there's a potential family, because you should have the ability to back out if you don't think you're going to be a good fit for that kid. So just know, a lot of people ask, will I be able to meet my kid before I adopt them or before I agree to adopt them? And the truth is, no, in most cases, you will not meet the child before you say yes to taking them on as a placement, but you have the opportunity to know a lot about them. And I encourage you to write down a list of so many questions, any question you have, and ask it during that meeting, because that is often recorded. They want to prove that they have told you everything. There are sometimes caseworkers who may kind of gloss over things because they really want that child to get a family. And your job is to push and ask all of those questions to ensure that you are equipped to care for that child well. This meeting can last quite a while. They're going to give you all the background information on the child, family, medical history, behavioral history. Sometimes you'll get a huge stack of papers depending on how long the kid's been in foster care. And you'll get all of this information you can go through to see how have they done in school? What are some of the difficult behaviors? Have they ever been hospitalized for anything? You have all of this information at your fingertips, especially if you ask. And they'll give you some time to make a decision after that meeting. And then if you say yes, then you get to actually start meeting your child and having visits. So this is such a sweet, wonderful time. I vividly remember the visits with all 3 of my kids and just that first time meeting them, and just how magical and strange and uncomfortable and just great all at the same time. Oftentimes you'll meet them first within their foster home, and then maybe another day you'll get to take them on a little outing during the day, maybe to a restaurant or a park or something like that, and you'll take them back to their foster home. Eventually they may do some overnight visits at your home where they go back to their foster home for a little while. And then we get to the next step, which is step 9, where you foster your child for 6 months. Now, I know, I said in this video, this is how to adopt without fostering. But the thing is, you're not fostering in the traditional sense. The traditional sense of foster care is a child is coming into your home, and the idea is that it is a temporary placement because the goal of foster care is reunification with biological family. However, in this case, that is no longer a possibility. So you are not fostering in the traditional sense that they could just leave at any time. This 6-month period is honestly more for you than it is for them to make sure that you're okay. In most situations, if an adoption is disrupted before it's finalized, it is because the prospective adoptive parents decided that they couldn't go down that road anymore, that they just didn't feel they could truly provide for that child's needs. So you're not truly a foster parent, but this is 6 months before you finalize the adoption. Your child's going to move in. You're going to have somewhat regular social worker visits to check in on you guys and make sure you're doing okay. I think a lot of people can easily view these as like, oh, they're checking up on me, but I viewed it very much as like, they're here to help me and answer my questions. We had some great social workers involved in our agency, and I truly felt like they were a wealth of information, and I actually liked when they came over. Sometimes our kids' behaviors would get worse when they were here because it's like trauma and all that stuff, but they were very helpful in giving some insight on some of the behaviors we were seeing and things like that. And so during that 6-month period, it's kind of weird because they're not officially adopted yet, but you're planning to adopt them, and you're kind of just in this like limbo. And I think your kids will feel this limbo as well, especially if they're a little bit older. So you want to do everything you can to be reassuring them that you can't wait to adopt them and you're so excited that they're a part of your family. And during the 6-month period, you do have to follow the rules of foster care. So for example, there are requirements for how frequently you take them to the doctor or to the dentist and things like that. You have to ask permission before you travel anywhere with the child. These are all things that normal parents don't have to do, but during the 6-month period you do. However, our 10th and final step is at the end of the 6 months, as it gets a little bit closer, you're going to find an attorney, and usually the agency or the county your child is from will recommend someone to you. You'll work with an attorney to get the paperwork all laid out for finalizing your adoption. They'll help you set a court date that works for you, and then you will go to court, finalize your adoption, and then you are officially a family. This can be a really great day to celebrate with friends and family that your child is now legally your child, to celebrate this new family forming. And at the beginning of the video, I mentioned you don't have to be rich to do this. This type of adoption, if you go through the state agency, can sometimes be free, and if you go through a private agency, is far more affordable than any other adoption option. The absolute highest I have seen is $15,000, and that to me is way over the norm. So we paid $5,000 for each adoption process, which when you compare to something like infant adoption, which can be like $40,000 to $60,000 at times, or international adoption, which can sometimes be even more than that, this is a much more affordable route for those of us who want to grow our families through adoption, but are not just like rolling in cash, And honestly, you're meeting such a big need for these kids. So hopefully this was helpful for you as you consider foster care adoption. And if you're not quite sure if you're ready to adopt, I have a free quiz I will link in the description below, which is aptly called, Are You Really Ready to Adopt? You can download this quiz for free, answer some questions, and get an idea of how ready you are to truly start pursuing adoption. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video, and I definitely recommend that you check out this video next. See ya!